for people who might think, oh, you see, the vegan diet is too expensive. No, you can get frozen fruits and vegetables too if you can't get the fresh one.
This is true. And I'll do a tangent on your tangent. One of the things that I always recommend to people when I've done nutrition coaching in the past is if they're price sensitive, getting dried legumes, dried beans are one of the most nutrient dense and cost effective things you can do.
Hello, everyone. It's Alexandra here with my co-host, Jason Wrobel. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Alexandra. Great to see you, as always.
And we're so happy that all of you out there are joining us because today we're going to be talking about whether you can out-exercise a bad diet, and we each have some personal stories about that. How much soy is okay to eat in a day, because everyone wants to ask a vegan about tofu. Should we be intermittent fasting? This is a question we get a lot, and I'm sure you've talked about it with your friends too. And then, what's all this about a drop of alcohol being bad for you? Because I thought a glass of wine was supposed to be healthy. So, Jason has a lot of stories to tell about that also, and I have my 2 cents. So stay with us as we discuss all this and probably more, because we always go off on interesting tangents, don't you think, Jason?
We do. I feel like the tangents and the roads that we go down as we discuss these subjects are so exciting and so interesting, because, you know, we, having lived the lives we've lived, like to be intimate and vulnerable with our experience so that it may color yours, dear listener and dear watcher.
Now, Jason, I had a quick question that I didn't intro, and I didn't even ask you about before the show. But when I was researching soy, I realized that I don't understand the difference between a bean and a legume. I've always used them interchangeably, and you're a chef. So I wondered if, I don't want to put you on the spot because I actually kind of know now what the difference, but I wondered if you want to explain or if you wanted me to, because I think probably a lot of people don't really know what a legume is.
This is very interesting. Okay, so I don't know for sure, but I'm going to make an educated guess, and then you can confirm if I'm on the money or not, Alexandra. So in my mind, my understanding were that beans were, you know, kidney beans, garbanzo beans, great northern beans, cannellini beans, black beans, etc. And legumes, in my mind, were peanuts, which I believe is a legume, lentils. For some reason, I can only think of lentils and peanuts for this moment.
Well, that's because, I mean, I think probably our audience could think of even fewer things. So legumes are plants that have a fruit inside a pod or a seed inside a pod. So all beans are legumes.
Oh.
Black beans, navy beans, pinto beans. But legumes are also peanuts, like you said, lentils, alfalfa. I thought alfalfa was like a wheat, but anyway, carob is a legume, green beans and peas, all sorts of peas and chickpeas. Those are all legumes. And then, by the way, while I was looking into legumes and beans, I came upon the word pulse, which I have heard before because I'm vegan and I read like about plants a lot, but I really never knew what the heck they were. And there's a subcategory of legumes that can sometimes include beans, but I'm not even going to go there and try. If someone's interested in learning what a pulse is, then please, by all means, go look it up and send us, Jason and I, a very concise explanation of what they are, because I just got so confused when I was talking about it. But basically, all beans are legumes. And legumes have some other interesting things in the category too.
Okay, so here's my follow-up question. Out of all those beans and legumes that you listed, what are your go-tos? What are the ones that you eat most consistently and your favorites that you find in your diet currently?
Well, azuki beans. No, is it azuki beans or fava beans? Fava beans or azuki beans, because they're in my no soy tofu. And then black beans, green beans, and peanuts. Oh my God, those are legumes, but I eat a lot of peanuts, nuts. And then I love carob, but I haven't had it recently because all the carob that they have had dairy in it, even before I cut out sugar.
Wow, so, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of carob. Those carob chips, oh my gosh, they have dairy in them, so I can't eat them. I used to love them.
Do you do carob because you like carob, or you're doing it as a substitute for chocolate?
No, I loved carob. Yeah.
Okay.
I loved it. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I just remember carob. My experience growing up as a kid, my mother Susan was very forward thinking. She was taking Seventh Day Adventist cooking classes in the early '70s, late '60s. Was vegetarian in the early '70s before I came on the scene, and she was always just very health minded. And I remember going to the little health food store where we grew up in Detroit. It was called the Fruit Cellar. And I remember, getting her carob because she was trying not to feed me as much sugar. I would ask for chocolate. I was a kid. I wanted candy and chocolate. So my earliest memories of carob were, her trying to convince me to eat it because she didn't want me to eat so much chocolate.
But I don't think carob is any healthier if it has the same amount of sugar.
You have a point. You have a very valid point. Yes.
So that's funny. And chocolate does have antioxidants and things. I don't know if carob does. I'm assuming it does. It's a plant. So anyway, yeah. So Jason, you want to start us off explaining about exercise and diet and how, if we exercise a lot, make up for some weaknesses in our diet or not?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And as we research these topics and get the information together for each episode, inevitably I start reflecting on certain moments of my life when I was learning about exercise and nutrition. And before we dive into this myth, one thing flashed into my mind. I was 16 years old and I was going to Powerhouse Gym in Detroit. And I was a young athlete. I was playing basketball, running track and cross country, but I was always just a really lean guy. I'm still pretty lean, but have more muscle mass now in my 40s. But back then at 16, I was really trying to put more lean muscle mass on and wanted to go to the gym and learn from people. And I remember I got up the courage one time to walk up to the biggest guy in the gym. And not just biggest, but I mean, just ripped and muscular. This man was clearly taking the sport of building his body very seriously. And I initially asked him about training tips. What are your splits? He was telling me about pyramiding and certain techniques he was using in terms of when he lifts, how he structures his workouts. And inevitably I said, well, what about diet? What do you, can you give me any secrets on diet? And I remember paraphrasing, because this was 41 years ago. 31 years ago. He said, I just eat whatever I want. And I looked at him and his name was Ron. And I was like, Ron, what do you mean? He said, no, I just eat literally whatever I want. And I said, well, okay. So when you're done at the gym, where do you go? He's like, oh yeah, I go to Burger King, get a triple Whopper and a side of fries and onion rings and a da-da-da. And he's going through his diet. And my young mind could not understand how this man physically, externally, was the bastion of strength and virility and this sort of masculine ideal, quote unquote. And even then, I didn't know so much about nutrition at 16. There was something in me that went, this doesn't seem right. So, I don't know where Ron is now, but it clearly planted this idea in my mind, Alexandra, that someone is being motivated by perhaps strength or goals for lifting a certain amount of weight or aesthetically wanting to look a certain way versus training and eating for longevity, which is a very different aim and a very different intention. So I say all that because this myth that we're trying to bust, can you counteract the effects of an unhealthy diet with exercise? There's a lot of interesting studies and research, but the one that I really wanted to lead with here is one that is coming from the University of Sydney. And the University of Sydney, they looked at this information from the UK Biobank. And I thought, well, this is interesting. What is the UK Biobank? So the UK Biobank is apparently this giant database of health information that resides, yes, in the United Kingdom. And it's something that you can access and gain data to the world's most important health research database. I'd never heard of this before, but it's a large-scale biomedical database and research resource containing genetic, lifestyle, and health information and biological samples from 500,000 UK participants. So this study from the University of Sydney dove into this database, and they found that exercising to make up for poor diet and poor eating doesn't really work in terms of lowering your mortality risk. So that's interesting, right? So they found that eating well but remaining inactive may help to lower your risk of dying from certain cancers, but it does nothing for all-cause or cardiovascular disease mortality. So it doesn't help with your heart health. The research.
Wait. So eating well,
But remaining inactive may
okay.
help lower your risk of dying from certain cancers to a degree, but it does nothing for all-cause or cardiovascular disease mortality. So they've separated out cancer from cardiovascular disease here. They did find, though, that the participants who exercised the most and consumed the healthiest food, we'll talk about what that is later, significantly reduced their risk of dying from all causes, from cardiovascular disease and cancer. So they found that
that's kind of self-evident, right?
It is self-evident. This is kind of like a duh, right? I felt like as I was reading through this, I'm like, well, of course, yes, you move your body and you eat well. Of course, you're going to have a higher chance of longevity. So when we dig into here, again, yes, those who worked out and had a good diet statistically found that they had lower mortality risks. And as we go through this, we find that, okay, let's talk about what do they classify as a, quote, high quality healthy diet. Now, this is interesting because apparently their target foods reflected recommendations from the American Heart Association, which meant 4.5 cups or more of vegetables and fruit per day, two or more servings of fish weekly, and less than 2 servings of meat or red meat. Less than 2 servings of meat or less than 5 servings of red meat weekly. Okay, so it's vegetable forward, which is great because they want 4 to 5 cups of vegetables per day. But according to their standards and their guidelines, there is animal products involved here. Now, when we go down to the results here and we dig in a little bit deeper, they found that the high quality diet by itself, without medium physical activity or vigorous physical activity, had no statistically significant bearing on all-cause mortality risk or cardiovascular mortality risk. It did, however, reduce their chance of cancer mortality by 14%. So
if you eat well, you'll lower your cancer risk, but not a heart attack or other diseases.
Correct. Okay. So there's no benefit to the heart. And this is interesting. So when we are talking about what they are recommending in terms of exercise here, the researchers say we're looking ideally for 150 to 225 minutes of weekly moderate intense cardiovascular activity, about 60 minutes of low to medium intensity resistance exercise, weight training, and regular stretching. Start your day with a balanced breakfast. Have therapeutic foods such as lean protein, vegetables and fruit, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes in line with your hunger and satiety. How do you pronounce this word? Satiety cues. Okay, so from this, it sounds like if you're a couch potato and you just eat well, you're not getting as many benefits as if you are moving your body and engaging in cardiovascular and weight training and resistance exercise. Again, it's a little bit like maybe we knew that. I don't know. We don't want to assume what the listeners know. We have very intelligent, very well-researched listeners on the Switch for Good podcast. But I'll say this to be totally vulnerable and transparent. Dotsie knows this. I don't think I've ever expressed this to you, Alexandra. When I get busy, when I get stressed, when I get overwhelmed in my life, it's not healthy eating that goes out the window. It's not meditation. It's not my supplements. It's movement. Whenever I get overwhelmed or stressed or just feeling there's too much going on in my life, the first thing that drops off of my radar in terms of my health and longevity is exercise. So it's good for me to read this to reinforce that I cannot skip out on movement. And I do that all the time.
I think it's good for a lot of vegans because they do think that their diet forgives so much. And you're just basically saying, nope, it's not going to make you live longer unless you also exercise.
Yeah.
It might save you from a few cancers, but yes. Now, let me ask you, because I'm superficial and I thought you were going to talk about whether you can out-exercise a bad diet in terms of your body composition and how you look.
Oh, interesting.
And because I know a lot of people who will diet, and it doesn't matter what the quality of their diet is, as long as they're basically losing body fat. That's sort of the mentality of a lot of people. And I have a personal story in that when I was training for the Ironman triathlon, which meant that I was training I don't know, sometimes towards the end, the Ironman is a 2.5 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2-mile run. So the training could get pretty intense. I did not eat a ton more, and I did not lose a lot of weight.
Interesting.
That is because if you run an hour, you might burn a couple hundred calories, but if you go eat a donut right after because you've automatically zeroed out any calorie deficit. And when we exercise, we do get hungrier. We do eat it. We often have more hunger cravings because our body is needing more energy. So I think that's a myth that I do see that they start exercising and they think that that's okay for them to then start eating kind of junk and stuff that they really like.
Yes.
And dessert. And actually that is not going to help you change your body composition. You still have to maintain a good diet. And I know that because I also spent many years in my youth exercising like crazy because I had such cravings for food, and it kind of kept my body from gaining weight, but I didn't lose weight. The only time in my life where I lose body fat is when I clean up my diet.
Yeah, they say there's that sort of cliche phrase, abs are made in the kitchen. I see that a lot with fitness coaches and fitness influencers, vegan or not, saying that, it really starts with input. And I did actually find an article from CNN Health that talked about how you can look thin and still be unhealthy. I realize this might be a different question than what we're bringing up, but what it talks about is this idea that a regular gym goer could have little subcutaneous fat. That's the fat that's right under your skin that's easy to pinch. I'm actually pinching my love handles right now, but lots of visceral fat. And visceral fat is less noticeable because it literally is internal. It wraps around your organs. And visceral fat is dangerous. It's more dangerous than the outer layer of fat you see, said Dr. Colin Carricker. He's an exercise physiologist at High Point University. He said the buildup of visceral fat from eating processed foods that are high in sugar, salt, and carbs could lead to the same type of health risks as a person with obesity. For example, large amounts of visceral fat circulating throughout the body could cause the arteries to harden and become narrower, which is atherosclerosis. And this blockage stops blood from flowing to the rest of the body's tissues and increases your risk of heart disease and stroke.
Yeah, it's called TOFI. Not tofu, TOFI. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside.
Yes.
It's very dangerous. And people who are more apple-shaped tend to have a lot more visceral fat. And if you're pear-shaped, you're a woman, you have big thighs, you're like, I hate it, but it's much healthier. Doesn't have a negative health effect like having a fat tummy, and where those are the organs in the abdomen that you don't want to be covered with fat.
Yeah, and I think too, the point you brought up, Alexandra, about wanting to really satisfy the hunger. When I think about people that are loading up on processed foods, or cheat days are a thing that we hear a lot in sort of the colloquial speak around working out. The processed foods, it's the issue is when we eat candy, soda, chips, fast food, they have little to no nutrients, right? There's no macronutrients, no vitamins. The protein is a toxic, acidic protein. There's no fiber in there. And so it's hard to focus on things when you're constantly feeling hungry. So it's like they're eating these empty calories, which makes it harder to have a productive workout session. And then these fatty foods that have little macronutrients, they might give you a temporary boost of energy, but it's not enough to maintain a long, high intensity workout, right? So people end up feeling fatigued sooner. So empty calories that aren't burned off, what are they stored as? They're stored as fat. So it's interesting to think about, the caloric thing is like, no, we want high quality macronutrient dense food. And I find that when I'm eating really nutrient dense food, I don't have as many cravings, because to me, it's about the density of nutrients in the meal rather than the volume or the portion size. So I know that when I get a ton of macro and micronutrients in every meal, which I'm kind of obsessed with, I don't end up eating as high of a volume. So for me, I try and focus on nutritional density.
Well, part of the reason you might do this, and we should probably dive into this deeper in another show, but I was just reading about GLP-1, which is the drugs. GLP-1 drugs are drugs that curb your appetite, like Ozempic and Zepbound and things. And we actually make GLP-1 in our bodies, and foods that have higher fiber. The GLP-1 is down in our lower part of our intestine. So if you have a processed food, the food is already completely digested by the time it gets down to the lower intestine. So the bugs there, the bacteria are like, hey, yeah, I want some food, but there's nothing. And it's so the GLP-1 hormones are not stimulated. But when you eat something that's less processed and has more fiber, it makes its way down to those bugs who stimulate the GLP-1 hormone, and you have more satiety. We can talk more about that. I thought that was interesting, though. Anyway. So, okay. So the moral is, what did you learn from your research?
That if you are aiming for longevity and you are aiming to lower your mortality risk from not only certain forms of cancers, but also various forms of heart disease, the best option is to eat a very healthy, macronutrient and micronutrient rich diet, emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables, and move your body, not only from cardiovascular, where you're getting your lungs and your heart a workout, but resistance training. So healthy plant-based eating, consistent movement is the best way to achieve longevity and lower our mortality risk.
Just want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Have a little thing, another tangent, but you said fresh fruits and vegetables. For those who find those too expensive, frozen fruits and vegetables have also been shown to be very, very nutrient dense and have kept a lot of their vitamins, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, good. So for people who might think, oh, you see, the vegan diet is too expensive. No, you can get frozen fruits and vegetables too if you can't get the fresh ones.
This is true. And I'll do a tangent on your tangent. One of the things that I always recommend to people when I've done nutrition coaching in the past is if they're price sensitive, getting dried legumes, dried beans are one of the most nutrient dense and cost effective things you can do. And in fact, we look at populations like India, that there's a lot of poverty there, but they're a mostly vegetarian culture, or by and large, if they're Hindu, what are they subsisting on? Legumes, tons of legumes and beans. So organic lentils, organic beans, you can cook them yourself at home, drop a little kombu seaweed in there to decrease the gas production. But yeah, that's another good hack to save money and eat healthy and plant-based.
Yay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. And also, yes. Oh, an addendum that I learned that I wanted to make sure y'all knew is that you can't out exercise a bad diet if you're looking to look better. Very, very difficult. I mean, I suppose maybe you could, but it's much more difficult. So don't try that, folks. Just eat better. It's harder sometimes for some of us. I'd prefer to go to the gym, frankly, than eat well. Yeah, no, I'm the opposite of you. My workout does not fall out. It snowed inches here and I made it. No, my first gym was closed. So I went to my second gym today and was worried about getting stuck in the snow. But I was like, well, I need to go to the gym.
We're here to help each other then, Alexandra. We can motivate each other in those different ways then. I can motivate you with the food. You can motivate me with the movement every day.
You got it.
Did you know that as we age, our bodies produce less collagen? This vital protein that keeps our skin firm and supports muscles and joints starts to dwindle, leaving us with a few more laugh lines and a bit less bounce in our step. But there's good news. Yes. With vegan collagen, you can naturally replenish this essential building block and get your glow back. Through innovative extraction techniques from nutrient-rich broccoli and carrots, they've crafted 100% plant-based collagen that effectively reduces the signs of aging. It supports skin hydration, enhances joint flexibility, and strengthens hair and nails, so you can look and feel fabulous. And the best part, there are no chemicals, no preservatives, and absolutely no animal products, just pure plant-based goodness. So stay youthful, stay active, and choose Veg Collagen. Elevate your daily routine and let nature help you shine from the inside out. You're just gonna go to vegnutrition.com. That is VEDGE nutrition.com and use code S4G for 30% off. Right? You got it. One more time, vegnutrition.com, and use code S4G for 30% off your order. Now back to the episode.
Okay, so I want to move on to a follow-up, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have other topics to discuss. But when I was talking last week about, tofu came up, and you asked, well, how much soy can we eat? So, and I told you I'd follow up. And so I did. And first I saw a paper from the Davis School of Nutrition, and it said that the American Heart Association, them again, I think you quoted them too, right? And the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, they're okay with a daily consumption of 25 grams or more of soy protein, which is about a cup of cooked soybeans. And it should have isoflavones. Who knew that there were some soy products that didn't have isoflavones? I thought it came with the package, but that's what lowers your cholesterol levels. So there are other studies, though, that have found that eating up to 50 grams of protein, so twice as much, is also safe and could lower some types of cancer and diabetes and heart disease. So that's the range. If you want to stay on the safe side, stick to 25 grams of protein. That's not grams of the actual soy, grams of protein. But if you feel like you want to get some of the benefits, like we had Dr. Christy Funk, who's a breast cancer doctor. We had her on our show. It's episode 125, folks, if you want to look at it. It's called Breast, Sex, and Food. It's really good. She's a wonderful, wonderful interview. And she says, don't consume isolated isoflavones because that's basically a soy supplement. And she believes that organic, non-GMO whole soy foods like tofu and tempeh and edamame are, when they're consumed like that, they are anti-cancer, anti-estrogenic. And the reason they're anti-estrogenic, which is what a lot of people fear, they're going to get man boobs, that women who have a predilection for cancer that grows off estrogen are going to be more vulnerable and shouldn't eat soy. But the phytoestrogens in soy bind with these alpha estrogen receptors in our body and actually downregulate them so they don't grow cancer cells. And that's kind of what tamoxifen does, which is a drug you get if you've had cancer. Doctors will recommend that. So basically, that's it. You should feel good about eating at least 1 cup of soybeans a day or 25 grams of soy protein. And if you want to eat a little bit more, go up to 50. Which is kind of where I hover, I think, around probably 40 or so.
Good. Then that means I can keep eating my daily black truffle tofu. I discovered this incredible flavor from Wildwood that is a black truffle tofu, and it's my favorite right now. It's so good.
Wow, tofu has a flavor?
When you combine it with black truffle, it does, and it is incredible. So I'm glad I can just keep rolling with that because I've been having fun playing in the kitchen with that.
Well, there was another question from a YouTube listener about intermittent fasting, and they wanted to know if they should intermittent fast because everyone seems to be doing it. And I wondered, Jason, do you intermittent fast?
I've dabbled. It is not something that I do consistently. I was really into this about 4 to 6 years ago. And I actually found a couple interesting things. I would stop eating at 8 o'clock p.m. and I would not eat my first meal till around 11 a.m. or noon. And I actually found that when I was doing my morning workouts, I had more energy and more stamina on an empty stomach than I did if I were to eat breakfast and then go to the gym and lift weights and work out then, consistently so, which was interesting because I felt like that kind of flew in the face of the conventional advice I got as a kid, which, you can't be your best if you don't have a good breakfast, right? Eat the breakfast, then go work out, play baseball, do the thing. But over and over, Alexandra, I found that when I was sticking to intermittent fasting, my morning energy and my morning stamina and strength in workouts was through the roof.
Were you eating a lot of calories at breakfast? Or, how many calories were you eating? Because it might've been that your body was digesting at the same time that it was trying to work out.
I tend not to eat a heavy breakfast. I'm not a big breakfast eater. I tend to have dinner is my biggest, probably most calorically dense meal of the day. So I've never been a giant. I've never been a person to sit down and eat a giant breakfast. So I'm not so sure it was that, but I do know even today I ate dinner last night around 9 p.m. and didn't actually have breakfast today until about 11:30, which was about 2 hours ago from this recording time. So without knowing it, I was intermittent fasting. But back then I was just doing it much more mindfully and consistently. So I have found good energy and strength benefits from doing so.
Excellent. Well, I know Dotsie at first, she wasn't crazy about intermittent fasting, but she thought it was a diet fad, and Dotsie doesn't like diet fads. But then she started doing it recently and she really likes it. Having her first meal later in the morning. And she said on one show, I don't know if it was with you or was before, but she felt that it was a positive. So go Dotsie. It's always the power to change your mind. I admire people who do that. But I guess I should explain what intermittent fasting is. So it's also called time restricted eating. And it's an eating plan where you don't eat for at least 12 hours. And then the rest of the 24-hour day is considered the eating window where you can ingest food. And there are different ways to intermittent fast. Some people like that 12-12, right? Where you stop maybe at 9 o'clock at night and then you don't eat till 9 in the morning because it's kind of easy. Some people like the 16-8. So they have a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour eating window. I, by the way, did intermittent fast for a while and I liked it a lot. I ate late at night. I ate till like 9 and then would eat again at noon. But I mostly liked it because it cut the calories that I didn't have to worry about. I never went over my calorie, what I like to eat as calories. And I do watch my calories. So, and my research has shown me that is a reason a lot of people intermittent fast. And we'll talk about the benefits that a lot of proponents, other benefits that they talk about. But so that's the way most people find it easiest to stop in the evening and then have a later breakfast or start with lunch. And then there's also this 5-2 approach where you eat normally for 5 days a week. And then on the other 2 days, you cut your calories by like 75%, like 500 calories a day. That sounds very hard. I heard Jimmy Kimmel was doing that. And I don't know if he was healthier, but he did lose weight. And I don't know. It's supposed to, I guess I'm not really sure the benefit. That sounds like a different thing on the body. But so we have to differentiate intermittent fasting with fasting, because we interviewed on this show Dr. Alan Goldhammer. That was episode 289. If you want to hear it, he is a really good guest too, about therapeutic fasting. And that is days and weeks on water. And he says that the main benefit of intermittent fasting, where you just fast for 16 hours or so, is the weight loss. And it's not going to cure you of any diseases like long-term fasting. And in fact, Dr. Peter Attia, who's someone I've read his book and I listen to his podcast sometimes, he used to be a big faster. He would fast like for several days and then every 3 months or so, and then have a really long fast once a year. And he found that he lost a lot of muscle from doing that. So he did not like the longer fasts because he believes that exercise is super important and muscle mass is super important, especially as you get older. And he also says that with intermittent fasting, where you might fast only 16 hours, the autophagy, which is what a lot of people do the fasting for, doesn't even start until 16 hours, and maybe doesn't even start until 20 or 24 hours of not having food. Now, let me explain what autophagy is. It's the body cleaning out the bad cells during fasting because it's not spending its time digesting. And then there's also another reason people intermittent fast is to inhibit this thing called mTOR, which activates cancer. And once again, he says that it doesn't start until at least 16 hours and most probably 20 to 24 hours. So in animal studies, intermittent fasting has been shown to extend life, but it has not been shown by studies to extend life in humans. So My overall take on intermittent fasting to this person who wrote in is don't feel guilty that you're not intermittent fasting if you find it difficult or not fit into your life. But if you like it and it makes you feel good, like it makes Dotsie and Jason feel good, then yay. And if you find that it does help you eat less without having to count calories or that kind of thing, and it just naturally is an easy way. I have a friend now who wants to lose like 30 pounds, and he says he's going to do it just by intermittent fasting, and that it's helped him, cut out 300 or 400 calories, 500 calories a day easily. So the most important thing I think from this dive that I did into intermittent fasting is that really it's not when you eat, but how much and what you eat that is most important for your health, just like you started us off with, Jason.
Yeah, I think the concept of deprivation is important to bring up here in the sense that there's the physiological ramifications of what we discussed: calories, weight loss, muscle maintenance, keeping healthy, lean muscle on our bodies. There's so many factors. And the one thing that I also want to speak to is, fasting can bring up a lot of emotional content too. There's a lot of deep emotions tied around food and eating, and the comfort, the stability, the emotions that we assign to food and the role food has in our life. And one thing that I've noticed for myself and also other people is what emotions arise during the fasting process. And it can be very intense. It can be a lot of feelings of desperation. A lot of negative emotions can arise when I've tried different fasting techniques. I've done several juice fasts, if you consider that a fast. There are water fasts. I've never done a water fast, but I have done several week juice fasts before. And
And when you say you're talking about longer term fasts, when you're talking about the emotions coming up, or do you have emotions coming up for intermittent fasting?
Longer term fasting, which I think is a beautiful component because, again, if we can get to sort of the deeper roots, and just very briefly, many years ago, I identified why I had a sugar addiction. My biggest thing for many, many years was whenever I felt sad, lonely, depressed, forlorn, grieving, I would reach for sugary foods. It was, for me, never about fatty foods. It was never about salty foods. My thing was sugar. And it took me a long time to really see that and identify that. And I think the longer term fasting for me was an opportunity to have that sort of revealed to me of, oh my goodness, what is this thing that I do when I'm dealing with negative or challenging or painful emotions? I'm numbing it with sugary foods. And so the gift of that, I think, is also seeing, is there any trauma related to our foods that we choose? Is there any sort of deeper emotional connection? So I just wanted to briefly say that that's another component that, if we choose to do a cleanse, having the right guidance, I think or having the right support system around us is an important thing to consider.
Oh, yes. And look up Dr. Alan Goldhammer at the True North Institute to learn more about therapeutic long-term water fasting. He does it not only, I guess people come to him to lose weight, but a lot of it's for healing from cancer and all sorts of diseases. So, yeah. One thing I also see in myself is that when I haven't fasted in forever because of my eating disorder past, but in my 20s, I would think I had to only drink carrot juice or broth or something for a couple of days, and I hated it. And I always broke it in a terrible way because I was so full of cravings, even though I hear that if the longer that you fast, the less you want food actually after you get over the initial maybe 2 to 4 day hump. But is that food takes a lot of time. And so we use it when our lives are not, if we're bored, or we want to avoid something like feelings, but also stuff. It takes a lot of time. So it is probably good to look at our life without food and see, hey, there's other things that we can do in our life besides eat as a solution or as a distraction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of cancer, because you mentioned it, Alexandra, this leads us into a really interesting topic that could be a point of contention depending on who's listening or watching this. There's been so much research and competing philosophies around whether or not alcohol is good or deleterious to the human body. And much like any health topic, if we want to dig deep enough, I think we can find studies, research, analyses that support or deny any position, right? There's just so much clinical research out there. I've been sort of under the guise, before we talk about this article, of moderate alcohol consumption, that being red wine in particular, was actually beneficial for the human body. We can look at a body of research that talks about the polyphenols, talks about resveratrol, things being very good for our long-term cardiovascular health, the antioxidants that come from the grapes in the winemaking, and all of these myriad benefits that have been pointed to for many, many years now, which is interesting because this was just a few weeks ago. The U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy's new report, this report came out in early January, cites new studies that link alcoholic beverages to at least 7 malignancies, including breast cancer. But to add any warning labels to alcoholic products, the U.S. Congress would have to act. I don't necessarily want to talk about the ramifications of putting warning labels on products, although we might spin that into. What I really wanted to talk about was the incredible report. I actually found the full report on alcohol and cancer risk, the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory. It's a long report, so I have, truth be told, not digested all of this, because it is lengthy and very detailed. So props to Vivek Murthy for doing an incredible body of work here. But I will point out some highlights, and we can discuss, Alexandra, because I'm sure that our audience and our staff at Switch for Good is sort of divided on alcohol use. We can dig into that as some anecdotes as we go along. But this new advisory that just came out a couple weeks ago highlights alcohol as a leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S., contributing to nearly 100,000 cancer cases and about 20,000 cancer deaths each year. Fascinating. Did not know the scale of this. Apparently, alcohol use is very common. In 2019 to 2020, 72% of U.S. adults reported they consume 1 or 2 more alcoholic drinks per week. And the direct link between alcohol use and cancer was first established in the late 1980s. And the evidence for this link has strengthened over time. And the body of the scientific evidence that this report points to demonstrates a causal relationship between alcohol use and the increased risk for at least 7 different types of cancer, including breast cancer, colorectal cancer, esophageal cancer, liver, mouth cancer, throat cancer, and cancer of the larynx, the voice box. And the more alcohol that's consumed, the greater the risk of these cancers. It's fascinating. I've never heard anything about this before.
Yeah, and he says as little as 1 drink a day could rise this, or fewer than 1 drink a day. So I don't know if that means a few sips.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I don't know. This is freaking me out a little bit. I'll be honest with you, because it freaks me out in the sense, not because I'm a big drinker. I drink very, very little alcohol for other health reasons that maybe we'll get into in a different episode. But I might have 1 glass of alcohol a year is what I do. But when we dig into this, it's like, okay, alcohol consumption is now being positioned, Alexandra, as the 3rd leading preventable cause of cancer. Number 1 is tobacco. Number 2 is obesity. And that's just wild to me to think about the volume of alcohol that's consumed, not only in the United States, but the world. I mean, it's incredible to think about this. In 2019, an estimated 96,000 cancer cases were related to alcohol consumption, which breaks down to 42,400 in men and 54,330 in women. This relates to nearly 1 million preventable cancer cases over the last 10 years in the United States. Wow. It's mind-blowing.
Well, the World Health Organization says there's no safe limit for alcohol consumption. And there are actually 47 nations now that require warnings on alcoholic beverages, even though most of them don't mention cancer. South Korea warns about liver cancer, which I actually didn't hear in your list, I don't think. But hey, it sounds to me like people are really waking up in the last decade to the fact that we can't drink, really, if we want to lower our risk of cancer, then we shouldn't drink at all. But did you read anything about why alcohol causes cancer? Because I did a little bit of digging in there, but I'd prefer you to share it if it's in that report or anything.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out here when we go to, there's so many statistics. There's a summary of evidence. It talks about the causal relationship between alcohol consumption and cancer, and this is a summary of the evidence. So it talks about high quality observational studies and meta-analytic reviews have assessed and observed a significant relationship between alcohol consumption and cancer risk. So I'm looking down to see... apparently here it says extensive research has demonstrated specific biological mechanisms by which alcohol causes cancer. Now we're going to talk about some animal studies here. I apologize for the vegans, but it is what is referenced here. For example, multiple studies have shown that giving rats and mice drinking water with ethanol, which is the same type of pure alcohol in alcohol containing beverages, or its primary metabolic breakdown product, acetaldehyde, results in increased tumor numbers at multiple places in the body. At high levels, such as those that occur with the consumption alcohol, acetaldehyde is highly toxic and cancer-causing. Further, the data on humans and alcohol and health show a strong association between drinking alcohol and increased cancer risk. So apparently it's talking about the carcinogenic activity at the highest level. So it looks like this ethanol derivative, this thing that they're talking about, I hope I'm pronouncing acetaldehyde is one of the primary culprits.
Yeah, it metabolizes into that, and it binds to the DNA and damages the DNA, and this allows the cell to grow uncontrollably and, of course, start with tumors. It also increases inflammation, which we know is bad, right?
Yeah.
And alters estrogen levels, which I'm not exactly sure how. And it allows carcinogens like tobacco smoke to be more easily absorbed.
Wow.
When you do it. So you drink and you smoke. But now let me ask you, do they talk at all about the French paradox? And do you know what that is, the French paradox?
I think I know what you're about to say. And it correct me if I'm wrong here, but I remember reading about, and I think I want to pronounce her name correctly, and I'm just going to... So yes, so the woman who holds the verified longest lived supercentenarian was a French woman named Jeanne Calment, who documented a lifespan of 122 years and 164 days, the oldest verified human being in history. There's some contention around this with some Indian yogis, but verified 122 years, 164 days. Apparently, had a lot of wine in her life. Had a lot of chocolate and wine. So...
well, it must be the chocolate then, because I like chocolate, but I don't drink it all.
Where you read that, and I think this alludes to maybe the French paradox you're talking about, Alexandra, where like, okay, this woman, she's doing dairy, she's drinking wine, she's eating chocolate, maybe even smoking cigarettes. I'll have to dig into the Wikipedia page here, but I don't think that she was like overly concerned with her macronutrients and and her eating habits per se.
Well, I did read something a few weeks ago that said when people live over like 90 or something, then it becomes a genetic thing. What they're like, if they live that long, it's about their genetics over 90 or 100.
Yes.
And that's why you get these stories. But the French paradox is something that came out because studies showed that French folks have less heart disease, even though they eat more saturated fat and more cholesterol because they eat very high, rich diet sauces and cheeses. And so the theory is because they drank red wine, it might protect them. And for all the reasons you mentioned before, the polyphenols and the resveratrol and stuff like that. So anyway, that was the theory. And I think we also have to differentiate between people who have a glass of wine at dinner and then people who binge drink on the weekends at pubs and get really drunk. And I think we've always known that's not healthy. So excessive drinking was always considered. So it's the moderate drinking and the very little drinking that is new to our cultures right now.
Yeah, it is. And just to verify, Jean Calment, I realize we're just picking out one supercentenarian here, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
At sometimes she would eat up to 1 kilo of chocolate, 2.2 pounds of chocolate a week. And after her meals, she would smoke a cigarette and drink a small amount of port wine. Take that for what you will.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to go back to 2 points in this new study that came out from the Surgeon General, Alexandra. And there's some breakdowns, as you mentioned, to how does alcohol cause cancer? It jumps out here and talks about the ethanol causing cancer in 4 distinct ways. We talked about the acetaldehyde, the metabolite that causes cancer by binding DNA and damaging it, you mentioned. Alcohol generates reactive oxygen species, which you said increase inflammation, damage DNA, proteins, and lipids through oxidation, increases and alters hormone levels. And yeah, those tobacco smoke. Now, here's the thing too, that is interesting when we talk about the number of drinks. So there's a call out in here that 741,300 cancer cases worldwide were attributable to alcohol consumption in the year 2020. The risk of cancer is lower at lower levels of consumption. However, many people consume less than 2 drinks per day, thus leading to a similar number of overall cancer cases at lower levels as higher levels of consumption. So this is saying, it actually breaks it down. Less than 2 alcoholic drinks per day from that 741,000 saw 185,100 cancer cases. 2 to 4 alcoholic drinks per day, 209,800 cancer cases. 4 to 6 drinks per day, 153,400 cancer cases, and 6 plus drinks per day, 192,900 cases. So we're all seeing between 28% and 20% here based on the number of drinks. So it's showing, interestingly, the number of cancer cases for people that drank less than 2 drinks per day was higher at 25% than people who drank 4 to 6 per day.
But there's probably more people drinking less. Do you know what I'm
saying? Good point.
Less. So I think that's why.
Great point.
And that's one of the hard things about reading studies and things is that the stats are really tough because the rise in cancer, the absolute risk of breast cancer over a woman's lifespan is about 11%. So 11 out of 100 people. And if you have less than a drink a week, okay? But it goes up to 13 out of 100, 13% at 1 drink a day. So it goes up just 2 people out of 100. And if you have, if at 1 drink a day, it goes up 13 to 13%. And at 2 drinks a day, it goes up to 15%. So your risk of breast cancer goes from 11 to 15%, depending if you don't drink at all or drink very, very, very little and you drink two drinks a day. And a lot of people might think, well, you know what? I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
It's only an extra 4 people out of 100.
And I don't know why. And I want to say this, and I don't want to sound like a judgment, but 2 drinks a day is 14 drinks a week. And I think in my mind, that seems like a lot of alcoholic drinks, but that's coming from someone who has, very little alcohol. And I know, Alexandra, you told me before we began that, you don't touch alcohol at all. So I don't know, 14 a week just seems, I don't know, like something I've never even considered doing in my life. Even when I was, young and singing in bands and doing a little touring and living that musician life, it was never something I was like crazy drawn to. So it's interesting to think about the volume of alcohol that's consumed and how much this practice, this ritual, if you will, is woven into the fabric of human society and culture. I mean, I wonder how people are going to react to this research coming out because it seems like such a nonchalant thing that people do.
Yeah, very much a part of their lives. I was just telling my husband, Ian, like about a week or 2 ago, how interesting it was that in movies, a lot of times a couple, when they come home, they'll always have a wine glass with them. And that's how and maybe it might be because it sets up the scene and they're doing something. So it's more interesting than them. I don't know. You can't do the dishes, by the way, folks, because it's too noisy. All the clinking, it's very hard for the sound people. So a glass of wine is much quieter. That might be why. But I said, do you think couples do that a lot? And maybe they do. They have a glass of wine together wind down before the night. And so, folks, if you want to share your own personal story about how you and your partner, or you by yourself and your friends, deal with alcohol, I know Jason and I would be happy to learn, because I think we're outliers in that. Yes, last time I had 2 drinks of alcohol in my life. It was wine. It was under pressure. One when I was 16, celebrating my French boyfriend's birthday. He was turning 18, so he was allowed to drink. So I don't know. I drank the glass so fast, they thought I loved it, but I was actually, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever had. And the second one was another boyfriend who's a little controlling, who was pissed off that I didn't drink at all. He felt that I should be moderate. And so I drank a glass out of resentment and anger. It was the most thoroughly immature. So one is under peer pressure and one was like an FU. I don't know, but I haven't touched alcohol since. So I don't like the taste. I was dealing with food stuff, and I thought, why would I even want to introduce another thing that could get me addicted? I thought I would have an addictive personality. So that's the reasoning behind it. And now I'm glad I never started. And my husband doesn't drink either. So it's cheaper, folks. And as we know, healthier.
Indeed. Yeah. It's one of those things too, that as an aside, a few years back, I stopped drinking alcohol. Like I said, I might have a tiny bit each year celebratory at a holiday. And by tiny bit, I mean like a tiny, tiny bit. I actually had gout for the first time a few years back, and realized it was not from organ meat. It was not from processed meat. It was not from dairy. It was not from shellfish. It was not from the common things that are normally assigned. I was drinking kombucha, and fermented foods, including wine and including alcohol, can increase the risk of gout. So I personally stopped drinking kombucha, and I stopped drinking wine even on occasion, because for anyone who's ever experienced gout, it is one of the most painful physical experiences. It is horrifically painful. And so that was the thing that led me back in 2017 to eschewing, whether it's kombucha or wine, liquor. I by and large stopped doing it because I did not want to invite that pain into my life after experiencing gout.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Gout, by the way, from what I know, is crystalline stuff in your joints that make it really hurt.
Yeah, it's basically, it's when we consume foods that are high in purines. And if we consume too many purines, the kidneys do not have the ability to convert all of the uric acid. So basically what the body will do is it converts the purines to uric acid as a waste product. And if the body does not have the ability to efficiently filter the uric acid through the kidneys, it builds up in our tissues and it forms tiny dagger-shaped crystals. I've seen them under a microscope. It is literally like little blades, microscopic blades. And when I tell you it is a 10 out of 10 pain, it is a 10 out of 10 pain.
Where did you have your pain? Because I know a friend of mine has it in his little toe.
Mine were in my feet. Yep. Yep. And so for me, my alcohol story is I eschew it because it's very much not worth it to me to go through that experience again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we should add gout to the list of things that Dr. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, should warn about our alcohol on labels.
Yeah.
So, all right. Oh boy, we went on some great tangents. It was really interesting. Thank you for sharing your personal stories.
Yeah.
They were very interesting.
Thanks, Alexandra. I just love the diversity of topics we cover, and hope you, dear listener, are enjoying the wide swath of topics and research and deep dives that Alexandra and I are doing here on the Switch for Good podcast. If you have any feedback for us, we are totally open to hearing from you. And Alexandra, what's the best way to get feedback from our listeners?
info@switchforgood.org.
Awesome. So until next time, keep the questions coming on our YouTube channel. Every week we're answering your questions. If you haven't been to our YouTube channel, it is youtube.com/switch4good. That's the numeral 4, switch for good. You can go to our website, switchforgood.org, and keep up with us on all the social media channels. We're on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And we're going to be getting our TikTok back going. We've got a new strategy for TikTok. So if you are on social media and you haven't yet followed or visited us, you can find us everywhere at Switch for Good.